We are back, and just to remind you, our music sponsored during this broadcast is sponsored by NewVibeRadio.com, where this program also simulcasts. So definitely show your love. Again, Brother Charles Lowman over there has that spoken word contest going on, trying to give away for first place a iPad 2. Also giving away some T-shirts and things. So go over to that brother's website and support him. He's launching a brand new website, streaming music, news, talk, black-owned business, and so we need to support our own. So check out NewVibeRadio.com. I'm very excited about tonight's program. Again, when I was like in the 80s in high school, I don't think I really started learning about the Black Panther Party and other organizations during the Black Power movement until I was like 19 or 20 years old. And so that's pretty late in the game to be learning your own history. But of course, I was in their education system, and African American studies, I don't even think it was heard of, at least not in my county, not in my district. But I want to welcome and give a big round of applause to you, Sister Kiilu, for joining me. And I was telling the listeners about that African lesson you was trying to give me.
Hi, Scotty. How are you?
I'm fine. Can we try that one more time?
Oh, my name?
Yes, your Kiilu and the last name?
Nyasha. That's an African N. So you just kind of slide over it, like the M. Most people get the M easily. Mshale, for example, but the N is the same. Only you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and go, So, and then you just kind of slide into the next consonant. Nyasha.
Nyasha.
You got it. Yes, that means kindness in Shona. And Shona is an African language spoken in southern Africa, mostly in Zimbabwe.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to speak to you. I'm very interested in your life as an elder for a number of reasons. When I became politically aware through the music of Chuck D and Public Enemy and the lyrics that they were writing and talking about the Black Panthers and just the power struggle movement, that's when I started educating myself and finding stuff to read. And I, was very attracted to the message of the Panthers. So my first question to you is, what attracted you to the Panthers, and what year was that?
It was 1969, and I was working for the so-called War on Poverty. The pilot program was initiated in New Haven, Connecticut, the pilot program for the nation of this Lyndon Johnson's so-called Great Society. And so New Haven had a program called Community Progress, Inc. And I started off working for the main body, and then I wanted to get out in what they called the field, the neighborhoods. And so I was transferred to the Community Action Institute. And while I was working there, they told us to go out and organize the community. And I took them at their word. And so the next thing you know, they tried to fire me. But I kept running into Panthers along the way because the Panthers had come to New Haven vis-a-vis the death of John Huggins. And I had, that was my introduction to the Black Panther Party, actually, because John Huggins was the brother of a sister, Carolyn Huggins, with whom I had worked at Yale University prior to getting a job for the government. But and so he was brought home in a casket because he was murdered in January 1969 with Bunchy Carter, orchestrated by the FBI. That's a known fact. On the campus of UCLA by the US organization. And Ron Karenga, who later became Malanga Karenga. In any case, when the Panthers held their funeral, I attended, and I'd never seen black men, such stand-up black men, and the seriousness, they had their what were basically had become kind of the Panther uniform, which was black leather jackets and powder blue turtlenecks and black tams a la Che Guevara. So when I saw these young brothers, I couldn't believe it. I was so proud of them because as a young African American woman or a black woman in America, at that time I was already about, 1966, I was 30. So I was one of the older Panthers. I had a son at the time who was 9 years old, and I was a single mother working, trying to make one end meet the other. And I started attending a lot of meetings, and every time I go to a meeting, there was a Panther at the meeting. So I noticed that they were volunteers. They weren't getting paid. I was getting paid, although I wasn't getting paid to go to evening meetings. I was kind of working overtime. But eventually they fired me. They got rid of me. I went over their head. Then they just got rid of me. They chopped off the institute, and those who were really organizing and serious were left out, and the others were, kept, in the main body.
Was that kind of like what happened to Shirley Sherrod recently?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not that familiar with the case of Shirley Sherrod, so I don't know the comparison.
Yeah, Shirley Sherrod was the one working at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where the right-wing media chopped up speech that she gave and made it seem, took it out of context, and she lost her job because of that.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yes, it's that kind of thing. This government, you have free speech as long as you're saying what they want you to say. And they really didn't. The whole government program, poverty program thing, they were setting up what they called neighborhood corporations. And basically they were attempting to suppress the resistance that was springing up across this country. And that was how they were going to do it. They were going to co-opt all the militants. And they tried to co-opt me too, because there were a couple of militants in New Haven that got very cushy jobs for which they were not qualified. And they offered me one such job, as a matter of fact, and a job for which I really was not qualified and would have gotten paid a real military middle-class salary, a salary for which I would have had to have a couple of degrees to earn. So at the time, and I turned it down and joined the party. But the bottom line is, we were very angry by 1969. The end of 1969 was when I joined the party. By that time, 28 Panthers had been murdered. Fred Hampton had been murdered in his bed, and Mark Clark through a door. It was just, a war on the Panthers. And then, and of course in May of 1969, in fact, on my birthday, May 22nd, the New Haven Register had something like 14 pictures spread across, maybe not that many at first, but not quite a few pictures spread across the front page, and they were all Panthers who were arrested for the murder of Alex Rackley. And Bobby Seale was brought, and Erica Huggins and Lonnie McLucas were brought went to trial. There were 2 trials in New Haven on capital charges. And as many of you may know, I was already in the chapter as a Panther, just a rank and file Panther. And but I had worked in Manhattan and for close to 10 years, and subsequently in New Haven. But in Manhattan, I'd worked as a secretary for many years and a secretary in New Haven at Yale and stuff. So I had the skills. I had worked as a legal secretary as well in various part-time and temporary jobs. So I had the skills, and they kind of recruited me from the local chapter to work for the defense team. So I worked for Charles Gary and David Rosen and Katie Rohrbeck, as well as continuing to function as a rank-and-file Panther.
What did your family think at the time? Were you married at the time? Any siblings or parents still around? What did your family think about it when you got involved with the Panthers?
Well, don't forget I'm 30.
Okay.
Most of the Panthers were teenagers and in their 20s, you know. But my mother died prematurely of cancer in 1959. So she had already been gone 10 years. I had a stepfather and family out in California from which I was somewhat alienated for a lot of reasons. But uh, I was in New York, I mean, in New Haven from New York because I had married Wesley Forbes, who was one of the five Savages, and moved to New Haven. But our marriage didn't last after we finished singing and dancing and partying. And when the honeymoon was over, it was pretty much over. So I was kind of stuck in New Haven after that.
Okay, so you were sort of free
I
at
was
that.
divorced. Yeah.
Yeah, so you were free to get it to, sink your time into a political movement or a social movement.
Yes. And actually, during my the course of my Panther struggles, I had sent my son out to the Panther school, and he was out here, we're in the Bay Area for a while at the Panther school that Majida was running at the time.
There's a new book. I wanted to get your opinion on this, but there's a new book that has come out about the KKK putting a bounty out on Martin Luther King Jr. And I wrote an article about it, and so that's in the news section of our website, listeners at blacktalkradionetwork.com. But I'm very interested in the FBI COINTELPRO program, and especially its use of media and journalists. As you know, Mike Wallace recently passed, and I'll ask the question, and it's just speculation. I admit that. But there's circumstantial evidence. But I thought that Mike Wallace might have been a tool of COINTELPRO. What?
It wouldn't surprise me at all because my experience in media, because I came out here and I worked for the Sun Reporter for a minute because George Jackson had asked me to get a press card. So when the New Haven trial was over, he actually wrote me a letter. I had already started a correspondence with him, and through the lawyers and stuff. So when I got out here, he invited me to come out at his expense, but I declined because I didn't need it, and I came out here. And he said, "Well, get a press card." So I called Gary, whose offices were in San Francisco. He was temporarily in New Haven, and he hooked me up with Carl Goodlett, the publisher of the Sun Reporter, and I got a press card and a job at the same time that I wasn't looking for because he asked me to cover the pretrial hearings of Angela Davis and Ruchelle McGee and the Soledad brothers, George Jackson, John Clouchet, and Fleta Drumgo, who were on trial in a capital case. All of them were on trial for capital cases. So initially, so in working for the Sun Reporter, I was promoted to news editor, and the things that came across my desk were mostly from the government. So it taught me that black newspapers, for the most part, a lot of their stuff comes straight out of the government printing office. And a lot of those cartoons and stuff that you see.
Are you talking about today, or are you talking about black newspapers back then?
Let me just finish. I'll try to get to
Okay,
my point.
I'm sorry.
Taking a little too long to get to it, I'm sure. But the point I'm trying to make is my experience as a reporter and a journalist, both paid and volunteer. I've been volunteer since 1971 because when I left Sun Reporter after they cut up an article I wrote on Attica, I decided I wasn't going to pay taxes anymore, and I wasn't going to work for any capitalists anymore, and I pretty much did that all these years. So I work for the people. And the bottom line is my experience as a journalist all these 40-something years is that no matter where I go or how long, I don't last long. And I don't, when I say I really mean we. People who are expressing a radical or revolutionary viewpoint as opposed to a neoliberal or a liberal viewpoint don't last long anywhere in any media. And I was very much a part of the micro radio movement out here too, and did 2 years on free year. I had a program, a 2-hour morning show on Free Radio Berkeley out here. So I've had an San Francisco Liberation Radio, but I said that to say this. My experience is, just like George said, they will give 9 yards of media to anyone who is in their pocket, basically. And if you're not, and you're really in opposition to this system, you will not last long. And so, getting back to Mike Wallace, there's no way in the world that someone who could be a veteran journalist as long as he and not have compromised along the way.
Yeah, it just seemed from again. All I have is YouTube video clips, and I'm very thankful for those and the people who upload these clips to the internet. But I was just watching him asking, questioning Malcolm X about police brutality in Harlem. Malcolm X was talking about the police chief and hidden movements, and just the way that Mike Wallace was asking him questions with my military training, and then just watching police, and it seemed like he was interrogating him, and I would have no doubt if some of those questions were planted by the FBI.
Yeah, well, that it's all speculation, but like I said, we have free speech in America as long as you say what they want to hear. If you say anything that they don't want to hear or do anything they don't want done, you're out. And we see evidence of that all over the place. And the mainstream media, they've just become so mendacious, it's not funny. I mean, they just tell so many lies and they distort the truth so much, it's not even funny.
So I have to ask you, are you excited about new media and social media and the new technology that now affords us to, create our own media?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. I said, oh, wow, this is really free for a minute. But I figured we better hurry up and take full advantage of it while we've got it, because they're already trying to crack down on it. And they're already, doing all kinds of things to try to interfere with our ability to put whatever we want up there on the internet. So, no, I think it's fantastic. And look what it did for the Arab Spring in Egypt. I mean, if you follow in Tunisia and elsewhere, I mean, look what it did for the Occupy movement. It's very important for us to take full advantage of the media, of the internet and the Facebook and all of it. I'm doing the best I can. We old folks had a hard time learning all this new stuff. It comes easily to young people, but it doesn't come very easily to us elders. So, but I'm doing the best I can. I keep learning and learning new things every day of how to make better use of it. So, and while I'm talking about it, I'll just give your listeners my blog spot. Please go to my blog spot.
Okay.
It's you can just type in my name and it'll come up on Google. KIILU, N as in Nancy, YASHA. So, and .blogspot.com, and that's my, and I'm on MySpace and Facebook as well. But the bottom line is, yes, indeed, it's great to be able to get articles printed, and some of my articles have turned up. A friend of mine that has contacts with Indie Bay and gets them on Indie Bay, and of course. The San Francisco Bayview is about to put up an article. I just finished writing, Slavery on a New Plantation, which can be accessed on my blogspot and Indie Bay. And also a book review I just did, The Black Commentator. It's on the Black Commentator right now, and that's an online publication, blackcommentator.com. So it's wonderful, yes.
Do you think it played, well, I believe it did, but do you think it played a big role in the seem like spontaneous protests and rallies across the country for the prosecution of George Zimmerman in support of his victim, Trayvon Martin? What role do you think social media played on the public opinion?
Oh, it played a huge role, no doubt. And I also should mention, it's about time. BPP.com is the website for the Panthers. Bill Jennings runs that. We call him BJ or Billy X, and he handles that website. And you can find all kinds of information about the Panthers and what's been going on and who's doing what and all kinds of activities. Yes.
Well, we need to take a station identification break, 30 seconds. And when we come back, will you talk to us, Sister Kiilu, about Hugo Pinell and educate me? And I'm pretty sure people my age, I'm 45 years old. You said 1969. I was just 3 years old. And you know, the education system was not teaching us about you guys, our history and our roots. So will you talk to us about Hugo Pinell and, what it is that we can do that's in our power to bring him out of prison because he's a political prisoner. So we'll be right back, and I'll let you answer all those questions after this message.
Sure, no problem.
Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
And we are back again. We're speaking to Sister Kiilu, who's a former Panther, a journalist, just a wealth of information and history. So, Sister Kiilu, will you talk to us and tell us who Hugo Pinell is? I understand he has a connection to the Black Panthers.
Well, I don't know that he was ever actually a member of the Black Panther Party, but he was very much a part of the Black movement behind the walls.
Okay.
And that was the movement that was basically started by W.L. Nolan, George Jackson, Howard Toll, and other conscious brothers at the time. And Yogi went into prison on an assault charge when he was only 19 years old, and he was an immigrant. His mother brought him to this country when he was only 12 years old, and he started getting into trouble as a juvenile, and he ran with kids from Fillmore and Hunters Point here. And when he was in prison, the Mexicans tried to claim him, so to speak, and they told him that he couldn't hang out with his friends, his black friends, and if he wanted to be with, and he had to choose, and so he chose.
This is while he was behind the walls?
Yes, because he didn't, and so he hung with the blacks and became part of the black movement. And I want to share with you some of a letter that, let me first give you more of the historical background. One of the books I highly recommend that people read if they want to know about that early black movement, it's titled The Melancholy History of Soledad Prison by Min Yee, Y-E-E. And it's an excellent book, the best that has been written on that period, and it really exposes the very, very brutal conditions that brothers were living under. I mean, the hole in San Quentin at that time, for example, or Soledad, was really a hole. Okay, a hole in the floor, and filthy and nasty, and then the freezing cold. It was just horrible. So those, and also the racism was very thick. There weren't that many blacks in prison at the time, and these Yogi and George and others, though they and WL, they just wouldn't tolerate. They would fight back. Okay, for example, when Geronimo came out, he told me Yogi could see. That's his nickname, Yogi Bear. Hugo Pinell is his regular name, but if he saw somebody being beaten or brutalized by one of the guards, he would jump in. He didn't even have to know the brother, but he would fight. And in letters he's written to me over the years, I've been corresponding with him off and on since 1973, consistently for the past 22 years that he's been in Pelican Bay SHU, okay, the torture chamber. He's been in prison now for 48 years and at least 42 in the solitary, okay? So getting back to the movement battles, you know, I'll share with him a letter that he wrote to Terry Collins. Best of love and health to you and family. It's good to hear from you always, even through the hard times, because we can share and be solid company. Thank you for the kind words and for recognizing the great work of a few brothers in here from so long ago who were really serious about liberation and the transformation of self. And oh, by the way, he wouldn't have been able to get this out of a California prison if he had included George Jackson. So that's the only reason George Jackson is missing from this. For me, it begins with the new WL in San Quentin in March in 1967, because I remember the old WL in Soledad in 63 to 4 when he was consistently messing up, as were most of us youngsters. Therefore, when the new WL greeted me in San Quentin and he was handing me some literature and telling me about the Black consciousness studies, the self-reliant principles of living, the Black liberation movement, and the building of the new man, he became my principal example because I noticed the positive and significant changes in him. He used Malcolm as our primary example of self-transformation, and he felt that all of us brothers could make that same transformation, and not talking about religion because that should be a conscientious personal choice. And I should stop here and explain to you who W.L. Nolan was, for those of you who don't know. In January of 1970, W.L. Nolan, Sweet Jugs Miller, and Cleve Edwards were let out on a yard, and it was a deliberate orchestration by the prison officials, because they knew if they let some of these white Aryan brother creeps out on the yard with the brothers, that there was going to be a fight. So they set it up, and no sooner than the fight began, of course, as Yogi told me, and a lot of other brothers have testified, W.L. Nolan was like compared to the Marvin Hagler or somebody who was a middleweight boxing champion or something. Anyway, he was serious. He was known to fight under the gun, and he was fearless, and so it's unlikely that anyone would have dared attack him if they didn't know they had backup. So the bottom line is the tower guard shot W.L. All three of these brothers that I just mentioned, and left them to bleed to death on the yard. So that was the trigger for the other righteous brothers to demand, including Yogi and George, to demand that the guard be prosecuted. And of course they did their little kangaroo court thing, and so the brothers decided to take it. Somebody took it into their own hands, and the next thing you know, a guard was killed in retaliation. And that brought about the case of the Soledad brothers, and George Jackson, Fleeta Drumgo, and John Clouchet were put on trial. So I'll get back to this letter. Yes, there was the objective of converting the criminal mentality into a revolutionary mentality, but that was only one phase of the self-transformation process, and that's why Brother Malcolm played a big role in our mode of transformation. San Quentin was the best station in the CDC for Black prisoners to get socially and politically educated, because we had some righteous brothers in the liberation movement paving the way for us to learn, grow, and really transform. We had Muslim brothers receiving all kind of Black literature and consciousness material along with their religious material, and they would share it with all brothers interested in learning and changing. Also, by 1967, there were several Black organizations in the U.S., including the Black Panther Party in Oakland, 1966, and some brothers were receiving revolutionary and world history material from some of these organizations and would share it. All of that literature was part of consciousness studies, our self-reliant principles of living and self-transformation process. Most of us were very young, doing short sentences, supposedly, had been through the gladiator stations, Tracy and Soledad, and the time and place was right for self-change. We had the teachers, examples, the literature, the means, and the opportunities. So it was up to us how seriously devoted we would be toward real self-change. This was a wake-up, grow-up, self-transform, liberate call, and it was a voluntary thing. But to join the liberation movement, we had to understand the meaning of liberate and to embark on a commitment to freedom. We had to do away with old ways, old habits, effed up mentality, the club, homeboy, set mentality and attitude. It was in the self-transformation process, according to our teachers, the new man, a lifetime building, represents constant growth. History teaches us how terribly we were damaged and left to try and figure out, fit in a social structure in which we would remain confined, controlled, limited, and surviving in the revolving doors. Therefore, our best way to become free again, but for good this time, was and is the Malcolm self-evolvement way. Take as much control as possible of our minds, our senses, our energies, our emotional and spiritual powers, and gradually create new selves. If we would have been self-transforming for the last 60, 50 years, there would not be millions of new slaves today, and we would have the power to be making an impact and difference toward the building of the new world. Millions of us would be feeling so personally free, so new and strong and proud and rewarding of the constant evolvement work we put in over the years. I'll stop there. He is Yogi. I've visited him 4 times in Pelican Bay, and he's just amazing. When I first saw him, I couldn't believe it. He was so high energy and in such incredible shape. He's 67 now, but he's still in tip-top shape. Most guys in their 20s and 30s wish they could be in his shape.
And when did
he
you
has
say
a
that?
hellified exercise program, and he is a vegetarian, and he's very spiritual, though not religious. And he's just an amazing. He said to me one time, he said, "No, you don't say free, Yogi." He says, "I'm already free. Just say release me." Okay. Okay. But I think I neglected to say that when George Jackson was assassinated, August 21st, 1971, and 5 others were killed, 3 notoriously racist guards, and 2 inmate turnkeys. The odds were different, and it enraged the police. So 6 brothers were put on trial, and when I saw them in the courtroom for the first time, it blew me away. I couldn't believe these 6 handsome brothers, all stand-up brothers, with 30 pounds of chains on them, with leg irons, all chains all up and down their legs, handcuffed to their waist, all through their crotch and up their backs and around their necks. It was unbelievable. And the bottom line is most of the brothers were either acquitted or convicted of assault and have gotten out. The one brother, Larry Spain, who was convicted of the murder in that case, was let out in 1988, and Yogi is still there and locked. He was due to get out to be released in 85. He hasn't had a write-up since 82. Okay, and what is that? 30 years clean?
Wow.
And he's still not allowed into general population. Come on, this is serious torture.
That letter you was reading from, when was it dated?
Oh, November 2nd, 2011.
His mind, you were talking about how physically in shape he is, considering all the torture that he received. You said, 42 of the years probably were spent in solitary confinement, and that can be torture on a person's mind. A lesser man or woman would have been destroyed.
Exactly. He's amazing. And I tell you, he's my inspiration. I mean, big time. Whenever I even think about feeling sorry for myself, I think of Yogi. And I go, oh, I just can't imagine being in a room not much bigger than the average bathroom, 24/7. We have to realize that, unlike Mumia, who spent 30 years on death row, he could get phone calls out, at least. Yogi can't. he hasn't been able to make a phone call in heaven only knows how many decades.
And what is
And and
reason
I
given?
mean, he hasn't seen the sky in 22. It's awful. It's just unbelievable.
I mean, it sounds like, this is a violation of human rights charter through the UN, and
Oh,
not
yes, it is. Oh,
okay.
hell yeah. It's in violation of Geneva Conventions, the International Covenant on the Treaty of the Treatment of Prisoners. Oh yeah, big time. And the case is being taken to the UN, the whole business of solitary confinement, and lots of action is being taken at this time, as a matter of fact, because people are finally waking up to the fact that we've had prisoners. There are 200,000 prisoners across this country in solitary confinement in these monster shoes. The security, they call them different names, but they're all lockup, and it's 24/7 lockup. You might get out to another enclosed outdoor space. In Pelican Bay, it's just another outdoor closet with 20-foot high walls. They don't give you even a ball to bounce around. Nothing, and you're out there alone, and you're escorted from your cell. Chained to two guards. It's really nasty, and the only visits he's allowed, and the other prisoners in the SHU are on weekends or holidays. And by the time they put you through all the mess you have to go through to get in, the hour has been whittled down to about 45 minutes. Now, it's in the northwest corner of California, so from San Francisco, where his mom lives, to Pelican Bay is about 800 miles. So that's a long trip.
Wow.
And it's not highways. It's those winding roads through, gorgeous territory. But, it's a long trip. It takes a long time to get there. And when you get there in this pristine territory, this gorgeous redwood territory, carved out as this monster gray prison, concrete prison, and the SHU is a concrete gray block with no windows. You wouldn't put animal rights people would have start to say something fit, but a fit if you put a dog or a cat in there. I mean, for goodness sake, windowless concrete tomb to put prisoners in indefinitely. It's sensory deprivation in the extreme, and it's just so nasty. I just don't understand how we people, Americans in this country, can continue to tolerate the punitive, torturous, destructive, nasty, vicious, sadistic treatment of human beings in this country.
Hypocrisy is the word that comes to my mind. I mean, I ask that question all the time, and especially when you have politicians who say, this is a Christian nation and it's founded on, Christianity, or the founders were Christians. Whether I believe in Christianity or practice Christianity or not, I have read the Bible enough to know that what they practice is not, what's written.
Oh, I definitely know that. I was a student of the Bible until I was 19 years old, and started reading other books besides the Bible. But yes, I was a very religious young woman, and I'm quite altruistic. Served the people through the church and all that. And I can tell you honestly, the hypocrisy is unbelievable, and it's worse today because you have so many churches now that are hooked up with the government and are just poverty pimps. They get all kinds of grants and funds, and they're used by the government to also suppress any divert and distract, and repress any resistance to this nasty system. So, and we experienced that in the party because there were very few churches that would actually provide space for us to feed kids breakfast, through our breakfast program. and very few churches that will cooperate with free food program efforts and stuff to serve the people. So it's a trip. Like Race Lee Boggs said recently, we have to put the neighbor back in hood. And Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. So if this country, if these Christians, if this so-called predominantly Christian country were really Christian, for one thing, the one scripture that I always remember is Jesus having said, in quotes, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. So now we have multi-billionaires who own more wealth individually than the budgets of a whole country. It's horrible. I remember reading that one of these creeps was worth $20 billion, and Sudan's budget for the whole year is $7 billion. Okay. The nation of Sudan, So I'm like, whoa, this is ridiculous, And now we have a situation where 1%, the international 1%, owns and controls 80% of the world's wealth, the global wealth. And it's global. The stuff is global, folks. And that's why it behooves us. It's imperative that we follow George's advice and be international and work on our own prejudices, our own racism, and get busy and start developing solidarity, because we need alliances. We cannot beat this monster alone, individually. We have to fight their divide and rule tactics. And I think this is one of the reasons they're so scared of Yogi in a general population, because Yogi is a role model. He speaks 2 languages. The very important language to speak in California prisons is Spanish. Okay, and because the prisoners are predominantly either Spanish speaking or either, as Latino or Black, and the minority are white. And speaking of minorities, we need to stop calling ourselves minorities, because we're not. We are the majority, and the 1% is a minority. The 1% ruling super rich, they are the real minorities, the ones that run the power brokers. And at the same time, minority means inferior or less than. Inferior in importance was Webster's primary definition. And I'm old enough to remember when it first started being used against us. And it first started being used against us when whites recognized that they were fast becoming a minority. And they are loath to call themselves a minority. And I think right now the viciousness of racism that's going down now is a direct result of the fact that whites see themselves dwindling, because they don't recognize the genomic breakthrough that clarifies that there's one human race, and that there are no biological races. And so now that they know that they're trying to preserve what their false paradigm of whiteness as best they can. And they think that American means white, and some of them, the more ignorant of the group, and they're just like a cornered rat gets more vicious. They're getting very vicious because they want to get rid of black and brown folks as fast as they can and preserve whiteness in America. So we have to be clear that there are lots of whites who are not like that. That's a hand. That I think that those whites are in the minority, and I think the vast majority of white people are ordinary, everyday working people who, if once you get to know them, you'll understand that our differences are largely cultural and to some extent political, but it doesn't matter what color we are. It really doesn't. It matters what politics we have, because look at this colored president. for example, who just passed the NDAA, signed that into law, which means he can disappear you and me tomorrow
Right.
and with no due process whatsoever.
That's very scary. I mentioned the tactics that J. Edgar Hoover was using against the Panthers and other organizations, and those were largely illegal and unconstitutional. They just never saw the light of day, and I would guess in the court system, you could tell me better than I could speak on it, but for that to occur today, I mean, he's really gone farther than any president before him.
Actually, he has. He has taken Bush's policies and expanded them exponentially. It's unbelievable what he's been doing. And people need to wake up and smell the coffee and stop being fooled and stop being hoodwinked, because that's what this is. I mean, you got to admit they're clever. It was a clever move because they pretty much silenced black people for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Do you think black people are grumbling now? Do you think they are making demands in exchange for their votes, or are they just going to, just automatically vote for him?
There are some blacks, I'm afraid, are just stuck on stupid. I hate to say it, but they just, no matter what you say to them, no matter how many facts you present to them, they can't get over it. They can't get around it, and it's sad. It really is sad. But things are going to get a lot worse, and then I can only hope and pray that people will recognize that fascism has temporarily succeeded under the guise of reform, to quote George. Okay, and fascism is here. The police state is here. And anybody who's been out there in the street knows this. We have to hurry up and do something about it. Another thing that Larry Pinckney and I have done, we've been collaborating, and others have endorsed a Revolutionary Party platform, and it's on my blog spot as well. And we're encouraging people to read that. We came up with 11 points that like universal health care, education, child care, gender equity, environmental protection, real justice, et cetera, the immediate release of political prisoners and prisoners of war, and all the things that we need to lead healthy, productive lives, full employment and a guaranteed income, all the things that our movements have been fighting for through all these years. And, Dr. King was very, very much for these social demands like guaranteed income and a redistribution of the wealth of this country. We have to do this. We have to demand what we really need. And if we keep working within the parameters set forth by the Republicrats, as Mumia calls them, we will continue to see our rights being eroded and just the clock turned backwards as fast as they can turn it back. And we're seeing that happen on all the issues. We're seeing reproductive choice rights being taken away from women, eroded, and we're seeing affirmative action has been thrown out the window, and now we're seeing universities becoming more and more lily white all over again. All those, we're seeing ethnic studies being thrown out in Arizona, and that's spreading all over the place. And we're seeing so many turnarounds. Education. I mean, now they have a cradle to prison pipeline. We have a new plantation now, which is prison. So. And slavery is, it's like Rochelle McGee said, slavery 400 years ago, slavery today. It's the same, but with a new name. And we have to wake up and understand that we cannot change it working within this system. We've been trying to do that for how many years? Hundreds. So it's time to think outside this box, this nasty fascist box, this capitalist racist system, this imperialist system that is warmongering all over the world. My brother, these every time, again, I have to say, I'm almost 73 years old, and I've seen them over and over again give the statistics of how many military bases they have. And the military bases now have gone up to, from just a few years ago was 700. Then it went up to 800. And more recently, I heard it was close to 1,000 military bases all over this world.
I think it's a little over 1,000, Ron. Excuse me.
Yes.
Ron Paul talked about that. It's over 1,000. Sister Kiilu, we have a caller. Would you mind taking calls?
Not at all.
Okay, I'm going to go to caller 215. You are on Black Talk Radio News with Scotty Reed and Sister Kiilu. Please go ahead with your question or comment. Okay.
Hello?
That person hung up. They dropped off the line. Getting back to the yogi, Mr. Pinell, are these state charges? Is this state correctional officials, state officials, federal officials? What kind of charges is he facing?
Well, no, he's already done all the time he should have done on the charges. His was up in 1985. This is 2012, and those were assault charges for which he got a life sentence. But he was eligible for parole in 85, and he's had 9 parole hearings, and he has been denied every time. Now, he was up for parole next month. Well, he was up for parole in 2009, and they had passed this, but his parole hearing was postponed to 2010, if I get the years right, and they gave him a 15-year hit. Okay, 15 years, come back in 15 years, and so he was able to get that rescinded because the new law had not taken effect yet, the new rule. So he got a lawyer with Uncommon Law, Keith Watley, a brother, who has taken his case and got this latest hearing postponed because there's some new rules about to take place to happen with the CDCR, the so-called California Department of Rehabilitation, of Corrections and Rehabilitation, no such thing. But anyway, they are supposed to be making some changes in the gang validation rules, which Keith Watley thinks by getting his hearing postponed a year, he might be able to get some relief under the new rules. But if he were to go right away next month, it would be likely that they would just give him a 15-year hit. So his hearing has been postponed another year. And in the meantime, during this year, I hope folks will access his website. It's about to be updated. It's not exactly updated just yet. I checked. I don't handle the website. Donna Wallach does, and she's crazy busy. But she's going to update that as soon as possible. But there is enough information on the website now to get a good idea of who Hugo Pinell is, and it's HUGO. P as in Peter, I, N as in Nancy, ELL, Hugo Pinell, .org. Yeah, www.hugopinell.org.
Again, and we do have that linked up for our listeners and those who will be listening to the podcast. Those links will take you straight to Sister Kiilu's website, as well as the website hugopinell.org.
Right. Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. And it's very important to get our warriors out. I understand another warrior, Sundiata Kohli, won his appeal of a 10-year hit, and he's going to get a new hearing very shortly. So letters should be. You can go to his website to get more information on how to write letters and stuff to encourage his release. He's 75, for goodness sakes. And
what's his name again?
Sundiata Acoli, or Clark Squire is his slave name. But Sundiata Acoli, Acoli. And he has a website that someone back east takes care of. And I email him. He's in a minimum security federal prison. And so I get to email him, and we write and communicate. And so letters to the board for him are in order right now. So please take care of that, because this, I don't know if you know who Sundiata Acoli is, but he was one of the Panthers who was riding with Assata Shakur and Zaid Shakur. I knew Zaid. I didn't have the opportunity to meet Assata, but I did meet, or Sundiata at the time. But Zaid Shakur used to come up to trial, and he testified for Bobby and Erica. And he used to come up from New York to support Bobby and Erica and Lonnie when they were on trials for their lives. And we used to have a lot of joint rallies and stuff with the New York chapter. So Zaid Shakur was murdered on the New Jersey Turnpike by the police. Assata Shakur was shot, and Sundiata managed to get away, but was captured and charged with the murder of a police officer who was also shot. So he's done 30 years now, and he's 75. And of course, many of you may know already that Assata was rescued from prison with the help of Marilyn Buck, now deceased, unfortunately, who did 25 years for her role in that. But she passed away a couple of years ago. But Assata was granted asylum by Fidel, and she's in Cuba. She was rescued in 1979 from a maximum security prison in New Jersey, and has over $1 million bounty on her head. But she's pretty safe in Cuba, I think.
Yeah, recently Fidel Castro name came up in the news. You have a baseball manager of the Miami Marlins down there. So you heard about that? I actually wrote about that, and
I'm laughing because you remember what I said earlier in the program about free speech?
Right.
There's no such thing as free speech in America. That man couldn't even say he liked Fidel.
Yeah, he couldn't even say he admired his toughness, which is all he said. This man, and he was telling the truth. And the thing that didn't play out in that story is, a lot of people don't know he was born in Venezuela. And Venezuela, Hugo Chavez has good relations with Cuba. So he doesn't have this, poisoned view of Fidel.
I know. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look what happens to people when they open their mouths and say anything that they don't want to hear. They're gone. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It really tells you a lot. And, I said to an audience recently that I was speaking to, I said, it's revolutionary in mendacious America to just tell the truth.
Mm-hmm. They went after Rashard Mendenhall for tweeting. And it's like these corporations are really claiming ownership over your body. If they can claim, they're basically claiming ownership over your mouth, telling you what you can or cannot speak, or there'll be monetary punitive damages.
Yes, they do. And they completely intimidate people and try to, force everybody to conform to the capitalist, individual, racist ideology. The Biden rule ideology, and don't show any solidarity with others. That's why they came down so hard on the Panther Party, because Hoover called us the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. What did that say to all the so-called law enforcement agencies in the country?
It's open season on you.
Open season, and that's exactly what it was.
And it seems like they've declared open season with these stand your ground laws. And I don't have a problem with the laws in themselves, but it's their application by the judges and the prosecutors and If you're black, that defense doesn't work. You go to prison, you plead out. If you're white, or white identified or have a white parent like George Zimmerman, uh, then, you can walk.
Well, hell yeah. Racism is alive and well, and but the thing that concerns me and worries me is that we've seen some bad acting on the part of some black folks. There was a video that showed up on YouTube with young blacks just acting real ignorant, and just grabbed a white guy, started beating him up and stripping him naked in the street, and stomping him and stuff. We two wrongs have never made anything right, and we should not stoop to that level ever of our enemies. We really should. We don't want to be like them. We can't fight racism with more racism. We have to fight racism with international solidarity, and we have to fight racism, not fight each other. And and again, I have to say that this is exactly why the Panther Party was such a threat, because the Panther Party started the original coalition. I'm not talking about that Jesse Jackson capitalist BS in Chicago. I'm talking about the Young Lords, Ewar Kuhn out of Chinatown, New York, the Young Lords out of Chicago and Spanish Harlem, the Brown Berets out here, the Red Guards out here, the Peace and Freedom Party out here, the Patriot Party back east that was the young white radicals out of Appalachia, and were an American Indian movement, AIM, Leonard Peltier, he and Geronimo were tight. The bottom line is we had the original Rainbow Coalition that was revolutionary, and a book that is very good at breaking that down. It has a lot of the original documents is The Black Panthers Speak by Philip Foner, Foner. And if it's still available, that's one you should get hold of. It will give you some really, really good history. Bobby Seale's speeches, Kathleen Cleaver, even a letter from a Faney from prison is printed in that book. The 10-point platform and program, and the platforms and programs of the Latinos who adapted it to meet their particular needs. So the Panther Party was the leader of the Rainbow Coalition, and it was truly revolutionary, and it was a threat. That really scared out of the powers that be, because the last thing they want us to do is come together, in solidarity, in international solidarity and alliances to kick their butt.
I think a lot of the black masses have not come to consciousness. They're tremendously affected by the media programming that Malcolm X talked about, and I'm sure you know about since you've worked in the industry. And when you talk about, images being on YouTube and, probably on other right-wing television stations of young black people attacking one white person and stripping them in the street, that defeats the propaganda war that's a part of the war, because I believe we're in war. I believe that the government has declared war on the people, has been for a very long time. If you've been black, I think the biggest con game they pulled on us was getting us to believe that we were free. Slavery was never abolished. It's still part of the Constitution as punishment for crime.
Yeah, it just took us. It just took a new form.
What would you say as we get ready to wrap up this interview? And I appreciate your time and your wisdom and knowledge that you're sharing with us about my history, about our people's history. But talking about solution, you were saying earlier, we got to start thinking outside the box. It's going to take everybody. I agree with you about trying to change the system from within the system can be futile, but unless you are coordinating with people outside of the system, I'm talking like a mole, traded to their system. I believe it's going to take a combination, a number of things. But what would you say to young people and even people my age, to bring about the changes that we like to see, the changes you mentioned in what is it, the 11-point plan?
Yes, please check that out. Also, if you we turned it into a flyer, like a pamphlet, printed both sides in 3 columns, and I have that available for anybody who wants to access it. The JPEG for anybody who wants, or PDF, which I get them confused, but whichever one works for that. I think it's PDF. I can send it to them. So they can just email me, hit me up at Kiilu, the number 2, at sbcglobal.net. That's KIILU, the number 2, at sbcglobal.net, and I'll send it to them. And you can print it if you, provided that you appreciate it, and get discussions going on about it, and see what you think about it. And what we need to do with young people, follow the Panther example. There are some things we did right. This is not the appropriate time to pick up a gun. So I'm not advising anybody to do that right now, okay? But I am advising armed struggle. That's not going to work at this particular time. So what young people need to do is study. The old song, I ain't gonna study war no more. You need to study war. Revolutionary war. You need to study the struggles of the past, the struggles that are going on today. Revolution. Study revolution. Get with Malcolm, Che, George Jackson, and all the, Kwame and Nkrumah, all the revolutionary movements that the Palestinian struggle. You can learn a lot from the Latino struggles. You can learn from the Cuban struggle. All this, the revolutionary movements and struggles, the Arab Spring, the struggle in Tunisia. All these struggles need to be. I constantly stay tuned to what's going on in the world and keep abreast, so that we can constantly be changing, because if there's one absolute in the world, and that is that things are in a constant state of change, and we can't be stuck on the same tactics that we used 40 years ago. The Occupy movement sprung up and spread all over the country like wildfire, and yes, we need to move on. We need to grab that energy, and that energy needs to be channeled into even more strategically effective ways of going up against this system. The young people, I have faith in young people to come up with the creative ideas and the means and tactics and strategies that can be effective in today's real world, okay? And there are many, many ways to skin a cat. Although I don't like that expression, it kind of tells you, it says what it says, There's not just one way of resistance. And to some extent, we're going to have to probably go with the nonviolent civil rights kinds of resistance. And for example, in the California prison system, they went on hunger strikes. So did the Georgia prisoners. You use whatever means, any means necessary means just that. If all you can do is go on a hunger strike, then do that. If all you can do is boycott, do that. Me, myself, I decided I wasn't going to pay taxes to and work for these dogs anymore. And it's a tough road to hoe, but I also decided that I was going to commit my life to serving the people, body and soul, to educate, to liberate. And if you're going to educate to liberate, then you have to learn. You have to be constantly learning and growing. So the bottom line is form study groups. Panthers have PE classes. In fact, when I joined the party, if I can very briefly say this, I thought I was smart, tell you the truth. I'm 30 years old. You know, I graduated from Lowell High out here and thinking I was kind of smart because I had a B plus average. I matriculated to Hunter College at night and stuff, and, you know, all this. And I mean, when I joined the party and ran into brothers and sisters who knew black history and knew histories of the so-called third world, and all I knew was what I had learned in college and in high school was all about Europe and nothing else, I discovered how ignorant I was. I couldn't believe how ignorant I was. I didn't know diddly squat. So the Panthers had political ed classes. You know, I remember when Dougie Miranda and Robert Webb came to me with a red book to introduce me to the ideology of the party and to recruit me to join the party. And when I joined the party, Dougie Miranda introduced me to Marx and Lenin and Mao and so on, and Kwame Nkrumah and Che Guevara and on and on. You know, so the bottom line is we have to study, number one. And then a guerrilla is really a revolutionary propagandist, armed with weapons, and the weapon can be just simply the truth, okay? And whatever weapons we can use. We can use boycott, we can use strike, we can use marches, rallies.
All options should be on the table.
There are many, many ways to say no to this rotten-ass system.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly want to thank you for taking this time out. And again, remind people what they should do in Hugo Pinell's case. The website again, can they get information to write him and, you know, to keep his spirits up? Just let everybody know what they should do.
Oh, yes, please write to prisoners. That's so important. Keep their spirits up. And his address is on the website. And also learn about his case, write directly to him. Support his case if you have funds or money. You can help support his legal defense going to Uncommon Law, Keith Whatley, Wattley. You can Google it and it'll come up. And let's see what else. I think it's premature at this point for him to write to the board. We'll just, but stay apprised of him. And there's so many other political prisoners that need attention. So we need to, and also, I'm sure that a whole lot of listeners have friends and relatives in jail. You know, most of us have friends and relatives. I do. So we need to bombard those prisons with literature, with letters, let these prisoners know that we're out here and we love them and we're supporting them and we're looking out for them. You know, we can't just let them torture and repress and lock up. I don't believe in prison. We need to become prison abolitionists. I'm very happy that Connecticut finally got rid of the death penalty. That's news. And be death penalty abolitionists. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, it's disgusting to me that both Eric Holder and Obama are proponents of the death penalty. I don't see how a black man can be for the death penalty.
I don't see how a black man can be for the drug war.
I know. Oh, I know. And that awful raid that they did in California just recently was so outrageous. Just really, Gestapo tactics against people who really need medical marijuana, you know, to function and stay alive. It's really don't. I hate this system with a passion. But what we have to be clear on: take our rage, young folks, and hone it and direct it toward the system, not each other. We have to learn not to take our rage out on one another. We have a legitimate right to be angry and to be enraged by what's going on. But what we have to do is make sure that we hone it, control it, discipline it, and direct it to our real enemies, the system.
Sister Kiilu, thank you again for joining us tonight, and I hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you so much, Scotty, and you keep up the great work that you're doing, and it's been my honor and pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
All power to the people.
Power to the people. You have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
This is Ron Hayes with Hood News, and you're listening to the Black Talk Radio Network.